when you're an investor, one of the most important things is to come up with a game plan that works for you. That's really hard to do because you don't know if your game plan is spuriously successful results or spuriously negative results, right? You don't have an assay to determine true positives, true negatives, and false negatives, and you have to sort of figure out um, how to assess that. And I think one of the best ways to assess that is actually with peers, right? So you might have a strategy where you long all the stocks from A to M and short all the stocks from N to Z, and you have this amazing results with a great Sharpe ratio. But with your peer might say, listen, this is really spurious. You know, you're not doing well, right? And you may challenge your peer, you may not. But I think that you need some ability to look at the ground structure. I guess the structural dynamics, or the what do the people call it now? The Elon Musk way of thinking. I just called it structural dynamics.
First principles?
First principles. There you go. Yeah. So that's sort of what I'm talking about. You have to have some sense of first principles that work for you and that are reasonable. And then I think if you iterate off that, you'll be fine. If you're taking a quantitative approach where you are working with machines very heavily to make your decisions, I think that's a different story where, but you're talking about retail. I think that retail can do better by focusing, even though some, like you said, the literature would suggest that it doesn't make sense to focus on things that are known by markets. I still think it's an improvement over most retail investors' frameworks to try anyway. And I think that it's far from true that the literature leaves a lot to be desired. I think for obvious reasons. A lot of the people who write the economic papers and the reviewers and so forth, there's kind of this gestalt and edifice that's been created that's probably not moored in reality to some extent. So I think, I respect the academic workers, but I also respect the reality that we see every day, that there are good traders out there, that their processes are replicatable. There are good investors out there. So it's important to read the literature, which nobody does from the practitioner standpoint. But it's also important to have conviction in your own path, especially if it's working. So it's a tricky question. I don't know if that helps at all.
Would you say that improving beta models is relatively speaking sort of alpha in a sense?
It depends on what you mean exactly, because to me, I think beta is sort of your enemy. But there is sort of this like recursive or self-defining problem with the whole idea of beta and alpha, right? So I think that if your model as a non-quant, right, you sort of don't have to worry about that. But if you are working with factor models, Fama French type work, then you do have to worry about that. And I think that it's hard to say. Again, I'm not a quant, so for me, my method works for me, and I sort of have the Warren Buffett approach of I wish everybody else all the luck in the world, but I don't really care what you do or how you do it. It doesn't mean I want to permanently ignore the literature forever. I think it is important to understand some of the more technical pieces of finance. It's really enriching. It's fun. Some of it is a waste of time. A lot of academics are not successful investors, so there is a bit of that kind of sneering at the publishers, as sort of like just intellectual masturbation instead of real practical work. Where if their work was useful, they would make an investment vehicle and make a lot of money. And I think that academics have a hard time doing that for obvious reasons. Some of it's stylistic and preferential, but some of it's reality where they just can't do it. So again, I'm not opposed to the literature at all. I use the literature in every other field I'm in. So, but for whatever reason, I've always found that economic literature to be a little bit just less useful, maybe not useless, but just less useful.
Very good.
Yeah.
So
I haven't watched any documentary about me.